Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. The Reverend Dr. Cynthia Dowdy, to Bishop McNear, Jane Shule, Bishop Andrew Brunson, to the Philadelphia Fight Gospel Choir, to all the ministers of the gospel, rabbis and imams present, Philadelphia clergy. True blessing to see my good friend of many, many years, president of the Lutheran Theological Seminary, with us this morning, President Philip Craig. I want you to consider with me the theme, 30 years later. Since this is a summit designed to involve the faith community in the journey toward ending the AIDS pandemic, and since I have been asked as a person of faith to deliver a keynote to the people of faith, Bishop, they asked for a keynote, not a sermon. Let me bracket my remarks with two passages of scriptures. Passages that will serve as bookends to the report I want to give you as a 30-year veteran in this fight against HIV/AIDS. The opening passage of scripture is found in the first verse of the 9th chapter of the John's Gospel. The New Revised Translators of the Greek text render the passage into contemporary English as follows. As Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? I come with a report to give you today, the report of a 30-year veteran. 30 years ago, one of the members of the church I served called me and asked me to come by his home. He and his wife and 2 children were members of the congregation where I had been at that time for 12 years. He was a black man who was active in his church. We always hear about the absence of black men in the church. We always hear about the absence of men in their children's lives. Absentee fathers, non-custodial parents, single women trying to raise children all by themselves, and God knows we've got far too many mamas who are trapped in that reality because of many, many reasons. The systemic structure of racism, gender inequality, gender violence, unemployment, miseducation, a broken welfare system, and as Michelle Alexander was articulated this month, mass incarceration. It is a fact that over 60% of our black babies are born and raised in single-parent, female-headed households. Yes, that's a fact. But there are some black men who are handling up on their business. Amen. There are some black brothers who are living with their wives and taking care of their children. And there are some black men who are in church, in Christ, in the mosques, in the synagogues, and trying their best to do it the right way. Amen. Amen. I didn't say they were perfect, because ain't nobody perfect. Now, I know this is going to come as a surprise to 1 or 2 of you here this morning, but guess what? You ain't perfect. Bishop McNear started this, so turn back to your neighbor that you talked to. Look your neighbor in the eye and tell your neighbor, you ain't perfect. Turn to the neighbor on the other side and say, me either. There are are some black men. They're not perfect, but they are trying.
That's all right.
Good husbands, trying to be good providers, trying to be present for their children, trying to be good parents, and trying to make a positive difference and make a contribution to the communities in which they live. This brother, who was my member, was one of those men. He went to work every day, and he was active in his church. Sang bass in our sanctuary choir, 200 voice strong sanctuary choir. He called me one day and asked me to come by his home. I went, and when he opened the door, I was greeted by a sight that will stay in my mind for as long as I live and have a memory. There was nothing in his house but the carpet on the floor and the curtains on the window. His wife had left him, taken their children and all of their furniture, taken the linen for the beds and the bathroom, the dishes from the kitchen, pots, pans, and silverware. He came home from work and found one plate, one glass, one fork, one knife, one spoon, an empty refrigerator, and a note. The note said, "Do not try to contact me. I'll let you know when and if you can see the children again." With tears in his eyes and tears streaming down his cheeks, he said, "I would offer you a seat if I had one to offer a pastor, but I don't have one." So we sat on the floor, and he poured out his heart. He had been diagnosed with AIDS the day before. Now, 30 years ago, they had not made a distinctive difference between testing HIV positive and having full-blown AIDS. The disease was still new, and doctors and epidemiologists were still finding their way. This was a new area for many of them back then. So they just told him he had AIDS. He told his wife that night, the same day that they told him. He and his wife cried, they argued, they prayed, and while he was at work the next day, she left. Took everything except his toothbrush, his toothpaste, one plate, one glass, one fork, one knife, and one spoon. She didn't even leave the canned goods, the dry beans and the noodles. And of all the things he shared with me for the 2 hours that we sat on that carpet on the floor in this space that used to be his living room, there are two things he said to me that will not only be in my heart for the rest of my life, they're also the two things that pulled me into the fight against HIV/AIDS, and they're also the two things that became the driving force behind and the foundation for our church's HIV/AIDS ministry, which is now running up on its 29th year. He said to me, "Reverend, no one should have to live like this," as he waved his arm around his empty space. And then, after describing his day, the last 24 hours since hearing the diagnosis, the unanswered questions racing through his mind. How long will I live? How much time do I have before I die? How long will I be able to function? How long will I be able to work? How will I be able to provide for my children? She can't make it on just her salary. Will my insurance cover my treatment? What are the treatments? And will the treatments make me sicker? Like chemo? Will my insurance cover AIDS? Will they drop me when they find out that's what I have? Will my job fire me when they find out what I have? Will the church members shun me when they find out? I mean, I know they will talk about me, but will they avoid me? Will they ostracize me? Will my children hate me when their mama tells them? Will she tell them? Or will she make up some lie? Should I tell them if she lets me talk to them? I don't even know where they are, rather. What is she going to tell her family? Or will she tell her family? I love my mother-in-law. but she will probably hate me. Does God hate me, Pastor? I heard, he said to me, Reverend Milton Brunson of the Thompson Community Center say that AIDS is God's curse on those who sin. Has God cursed me? If I lose my job, I can't pay this house note. I wonder what she even want this house. You know the note is in both of our names, don't you? If I lose my job, I can't pay my car note. Do you think they'll fire me because of AIDS? From what I've heard, you can't even catch a cold once you get AIDS. Pastor, do you know cold can take me out? After describing the last 24 hours since hearing his diagnosis, the shock and pain of coming home to an empty house, no way to reach his wife, no way to talk to his children, and the non-stop cascade of questions that kept coursing through his consciousness, he said to me, Pastor, no one should have to die like this. And those Herman's words. No one should have to live like this, and no one should have to die like this. It was Herman's words that became the catalyst and conviction for starting our congregation's HIV/AIDS ministry, because he was right. No one should have to live or die feeling alone, feeling unloved, feeling rejected, neglected, stigmatized, ostracized, laughed at, looked down on, cast aside, whispered about, judged by other human beings, or being made to feel by religious human beings that they are in condemnation of God, or cut off from the care and concern of a loving God. So 30 years later, after that providential, revealing day, that I sat in Herman's empty living room, I come to you with a report of what I have seen, what I have lived, and what I have learned in 3 decades of this fight against HIV/AIDS as a member of the faith community. I frame my report in the structure of a review or retrospection. A review and a recommendation or an invitation. 2 parts. In retrospection, looking back over the past 30 years, among the many things that I have seen, there are 3 that I want to call to your attention today, Philadelphia Fight. Number 1, an indifferent public. Number 2, misplaced priorities. And number 3, ignorant believers. Like the brothers in John 9, verse 1. Yeah. 30 years ago, the public was indifferent to the issue of HIV/AIDS, at least the public and the publics to which I was exposed. HIV/AIDS back then was brushed aside as a gay man's disease, something from California, the San Francisco population. A West African thing caused by a monkey, spread by rich white Frenchmen who vacationed in Francophone West Africa, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso. Does not come nigh me. I ain't gay. I ain't French. I ain't never been to Africa. I got no plans to go there no time soon. I won't be nowhere near no monkeys. I ain't going to the Philadelphia Zoo. Brush aside. Indifferent. 30 years ago, the American public was indifferent. The African American public, except for the gay African American public, was also indifferent. And the African American Christian public, or religious people, was even more indifferent, if not hostile. Just a quick footnote before moving on, if you would allow me, especially since this is supposed to be, or is purported to be, an interfaith summit, or an interfaith effort. I just use the term religious public. So please remember this, if you don't remember anything else I say. HIV/AIDS is an equal opportunity. The virus does not care what you believe. What you say you believe, what you purport to believe, or what you profess you believe. The virus attacks Christians, the virus attacks Muslims, the virus attacks Jews, The virus attacks Hindus. The virus attacks Sikhs. The virus attacks Buddhists. The virus attacks Jehovah's Witnesses. The virus attacks practitioners of African traditional religions, Yoruba, Congolese, Santeria, Obeya, Omeya, Ogun, Banifo, and Shango. And the virus even attacks atheists. Come on. Equal opportunity in the footnote. 30 years ago, the American public was by and large indifferent to HIV/AIDS, and 36 years of pastoral ministry taught me that most people are indifferent to life-threatening and life-changing realities until it starts hitting close to home, hitting their families, hitting people they know, or hitting them personally. Or worse yet, most of the American public is completely indifferent to the life-threatening realities on the continent of Africa until the media puts the spotlight on it. Then it becomes a national concern. For a little while, it becomes a national concern, or until the next news cycle becomes a national concern. Don't believe me? Just go back a month to the media coverage of the 200 girls kidnapped in Nigeria. Everybody was chanting the slogan, "Bring back our girls." But between Kanye West's marriage to Kim Kardashian, LeBron James getting hurt in the NBA Finals, Donald Sterling, the owner of the Clippers, getting caught saying what millions of Americans say in private, between that and Jamal Bryant's most recent pronouncements about hoes and sissies, almost nobody can tell you anything about the welfare of those 200 Nigerian girls. It's no longer newsworthy. Indifferent. Worse yet, almost nobody except social justice advocates can tell you anything about the 48 women raped every hour in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 1,142 women raped every day. Not newsworthy. Indifferent. Even fewer people can tell you about the relationship between the Congo, the coltan metallic element in the Congo, the fight over that element in the Congo, the civil war in the Congo, and the coltan in your cell phone. Not newsworthy. Indifferent. Until something life-threatening hits home, indifference is the order of the day. When the talk was about violence in Chicago, we in Philadelphia, our attitude was, hey, we in Philly, we ain't Chicago. But when Junebug gets shot over some drug sale, or just because he was in the wrong place when the drive-by took place, then violence, gang violence, and drugs become real, they become personal. When crazy preachers like me, or radical reformers like Baba Asa Hilliard, talked about miseducation and the push for privatization in public schools, we were ignored.
That's right.
People said, hey, they go with that black stuff again. Indifferent. But when Philadelphia closes 23 public schools for black children to build a $400 million prison for black men, the indifference to indignation. 30 years ago, indifference about HIV/AIDS was the order of the day. Now there are more families in our neighborhoods, more people in our churches, and more members of our own personal families have been infected or affected. The fight against HIV/AIDS is gaining allies, and the fight is gaining and getting much more intense. 30 years ago, that's how it was. 30 years later, there have been tectonic shifts as it pertains to an indifferent public. 30 years later, however, there has been little, if any, change in the area of the second thing I want to talk to you about, which is misplaced priorities. The fight against AIDS takes place on several different fronts. You heard Sister Shul talking about some of those fronts. I categorize them under two broad headings, the personal level and the policy level. We will say more about the personal level in a few moments. Working with persons who are at risk, persons who are vulnerable, persons who do not have the final say-so over what happens to their bodies, victims of rape, sex workers, victims of marital rape, victims of gender inequality, working with persons who are infected, working with persons who are affected, working with prevention, working with providing for those families. All of those issues fall under the category of what I call the personal level ministry with persons. That's the personal level. But the second level, the policy level, Sister Shul said some of the things we don't have the political will to do, that's policy. And that's also an area where the fight against HIV/AIDS takes place. Yeah. And as a 30-year veteran in this war, I don't see those two battlefronts as an either-or proposition, where you either deal with the personal or you deal with the policies. I see those two battlefronts as a both-and reality. The church has to deal with the personal aspects of the HIV/AIDS pandemic while simultaneously fighting on the policy level, fighting to change policies that are harmful to persons living with HIV/AIDS, fighting to deconstruct insane policies that cause more harm than good, fighting to implement new policies that put people ahead of profits, and fighting for healthcare policies that make equity the basis for treatment, policies that ensure quality healthcare for the poor, equal access to antiretrovirals to all people, not just rich people, care that is provided on the basis of need rather than on the basis of one's ability to pay. And it is on the policy level, 30 years later, that I still see our country mired down in the muck of misplaced priorities. We still spend more money on killing folk than we spend on curing folk. That's right. Misplaced priorities. Even in the area of research and development, our dollars are committed to instruments of death instead of research committed to inventions that enhance life, like microbicides to fight AIDS instead of machine guns to kill enemies. Our defense budget this year, that great theologian Cat Williams would say, this year, right here, this year, our defense budget is $820 billion. That's more than our health budget. Misplaced priority. Our defense budget this year is $820 billion, while our education budget is $113 billion. Misplaced priority. We can't educate young black boys. We don't have the money for that. But we can incarcerate young black boys. We can find the money for that. We are suffering as a nation from a terminal case of misplaced priorities. We have the money for military drones.
Yeah, talk about.
Which snuff out life. But we can't seem to find the money for medical drugs which give or prolong life.
Yeah.
30 years later, our priorities are still out of whack, out of order. We put death ahead of life. We put drones ahead of drugs. We put profits above people. We are suffering from a fatal disease of misplaced priorities. Our pharmaceutical companies still control political policies that prevent easy, affordable access to antiretrovirals. Access that so-called developing countries and third world countries have made available years ago, like Brazil. Look at Brazil. Look at South Africa. But don't look too long or too hard at South Africa. Here's another footnote. I say don't look too hard or too long at South Africa because South Africa has virtually free ARVs, and South Africa has made themselves known through Nelson Mandela, Madiba. They got Madiba. They had him. He's deceased now. He was a strong ally for ABC. Starting at the middle school age, abstinence, be faithful, conduct. Raymond and I went to one of our denomination schools, Inanda Seminary, for girls from the 8th grade to the 12th grade. And Madiba did the dedication message for the rebuilding of one of the dormitories that had burned. And he upset those church folk at that seminary so bad, he spent his whole talk not on what the seminary was doing, not on the new building that's been rehabbed, not on the company, but on the fact that the church got his head in the sand. You better take your head out the sand and put a rubber in their hand. They had Medina as a strong ally in the fight against AIDS. And South Africa may also have easy access to ARVs, but I say don't look at it too long or too hard, because South Africa also has some dangerous mythologies endangering the lives of millions of its citizens, starting with President Jacob Zuma, who is on record saying that he's taken a shower after having had unprotected sex with a prostitute was the only protection he needed to make sure he didn't contract AIDS. Starting with the current president and going all the way down to the poorest resident in the townships of Khayelitsha, Langa, and Guguletu outside of Cape Town. The myth is that if you have unprotected sex with a young girl under the age of 12, under the age of puberty, a pre-menses female, it will not only prevent you from getting AIDS, it will kill you if you got AIDS. Female babies, toddlers, and infants being raped because of insane mythology in South Africa. End of footnote. The point is, however, that they found the money to provide easy access and free access, in some cases, to antiretrovirals, while we only have the money to fight unwinnable wars in far-off countries. We only have the money to have over 100 military bases on the continent of Africa, some in Ghana. We only have defense budget money, military money, jet fighter money, nuclear submarine money, private prison money, drone warfare money, National Security Administration money to spy on everybody in the planet. Now we can spy on everybody, but we somehow cannot stop the cartel drugs from flowing into our inner city. This is priority. We have Homeland Security money, money to build a wall on the Mexican border, similar to the apartheid wall being built in Palestine. We only have arms money to hurt people, very little money to help people. We have misplaced priorities. We got money for the militarization of our police forces across this country. We got money for the weapons. We need to keep the lid on in our inner cities, money for the weapons we sell to foreign nations and dictators to protect our business interests, money for armies and arming paramilitary troops in foreign countries and giving military aid to Egypt and to Israel, and money for all of the alphabets. We got money for the alphabets, y'all. CIA, FBI, NFC, NCIS. But little no money for the other alphabets, HIV, ARV, nor for the alphabets ABC, SADE, or DEF. Now, for newcomers to the fight against AIDS, you'll learn more about this today in workshops. ABC, of course, is abstinence. A, B, be faithful. C, condom, for your protection and for your partner's protection. But SADE is another AIDS prevention program whose letters stand for S, safer practices. A, access to antiretroviral medications. V, voluntary counseling and testing. And E, empowerment education, empowering those populations who are most vulnerable, providing shelters for women who are victims of spousal abuse, domestic violence, and marital rape. DEF is yet an additional AIDS prevention program whose letters stand for D, disclosure and safety, E, education and empowerment, and F, female control prevention. Dr. Beck Kuhn has a video you can Google to learn more about these programs. I'm sure that they'll be discussed with more information provided in your workshops today. But the point is, where we can find money for the first set of alphabets, CIA, FBI, NCS, and NCIS, little or no money can be found for the other alphabets. We have misplaced priorities. We have misplaced priorities 30 years ago and 30 years later. We still have misplaced priorities. Since Nixon's 1971 declaration of the war on drugs, In 2010, from 1971 to 2010, we had spent over $1 trillion waging a war not on drugs, but on poor black folks. If we had spent that half that amount in the war on AIDS, just think of how far along we would be, how much closer to that cure Dr. Cho talked about that we would be. Instead of machine guns, if we had put the priority with microbicides. 30 years later, we made some progress with an indifferent public. 30 years later, we've had little or no progress with our misplaced priorities, partially because the church has been silent when we should have been speaking on behalf of a God of love and a God of life, instead of cooperating with a government of death and a government of empire. Our God has salvation for the world as God's priority. Our government has domination of the world as its priority. We've got misplaced priorities. Speaking of the church, however, segues me into the third thing that I have seen in retrospect. 30 years later, I've not only seen an indifferent public and misplaced priorities. 30 years later, I've also seen the fight against AIDS hampered, hamstrung, hindered, or held up by ignorant believers.
There you go.
Now, before anybody gets offended, please know this. I don't mean ignorant pejoratively. I don't mean ignorant derogatorily. I mean ignorant descriptively. Ignorance means not knowing. There are believers who do not know. They are ignorant. One of my favorite HIV/AIDS t-shirts, Dr. Downey, I've seen now for over 3 decades, says that AIDS is spread not 4 ways, but 3 ways. Sexual fluids, blood, and ignorance. Millions of people do not know. They don't even know how the virus behaves. They don't know how the virus is transmitted. Our HIV/AIDS ministry has had great difficulty with families of HIV-positive persons getting them to understand simple things like you cannot transmit or catch AIDS by sharing a meal at the same table with somebody who is HIV-positive. We have had members of our congregation disrespected by their own loved ones, refusing to let them use glass dishes and regular silverware, forcing them to eat off paper plates with plastic forks and spoons. They just don't know. They are ignorant. And many of those millions are church members, believers. When I retired, I'm glad to see one session today on teenage sexuality and teenage pregnancy. I retired 6 years ago. We had teenagers in our congregation who actually believed that giving head instead of vaginal penetration not only preserved their virginity, but also prevented them from getting AIDS. Millions of people just don't know. They are ignorant. And many of those millions are believers. They sit in our pews week after week, praising God and listening to us talk about prosperity. Many believers do not know the difference between HIV and full-blown AIDS. Many more believers do not know what the letters HIV or the letters AIDS stand for. Many believers resist getting tested in our churches because they think that getting tested is tantamount to a confession. I knew they were doing something. Bad. They do not know that getting tested is not for confession, it's for protection. One of the most painfully eye-opening experiences I have had in my 30-year journey in HIV/AIDS ministry took place on the campus of Tuskegee University one summer. Some of you know about that. I was back at Professor Seal at the Balm in Gilead, held every summer a week-long series of sessions on HIV/AIDS. Vanessa didn't believe, and those who worked with Balm in Gilead, the ministers, could give up a whole week, so she had one day for ministers in that week. One day, all day long, called for pastors only, and I was asked to lead it for pastors only day. And in that morning session, 9 to 12, I was describing one of the workshops today, how we, not the only way to do it, just how we as a congregation had set up our HIV/AIDS ministry. And I described how people just volunteer to work with AIDS ministry, know that you got to be trained.
That's right.
We had 35 hours of training they went through with the epidemiologists, somebody from CDC, somebody from Chicago Board of Health, somebody who was HIV positive, somebody with full-blown AIDS, parents of children of AIDS, persons living with AIDS in that training session. Because we had to screen out, first of all, we had to screen out people who were homophobic. Because a large portion of the persons who you will be working with in HIV/AIDS ministry are same-gender loving. And if you got a problem with same-gender loving people, this is not the ministry you need to be in. You need to be on the earthly board. We also had to screen out people who didn't understand what Bishop Wright said, that prayer and faith work along with medicine. They felt that all you needed was prayer. And that God could cure, back then, and we're talking 15, 20 years ago, God could cure AIDS through prayer. And the question and answer period, one of the questions was, are you saying God can't cure homosexuals? Are you saying God can't cure AIDS? I said, if you go to the top of the William Penn building right here, get on Billy's hat and jump, and say, I'm saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, like the precious gift of tongues. Save me. God has another law in effect called gravity. About 20 preachers got up at quarter to 12 and walked out. I thought they were going to get in line for lunch. When I got outside at 12, they were laughing at me and said, hey brother, they ain't coming back to your session. If you ain't got no faith, many believers do not know that an individual's orientation has nothing to do with his or her susceptibility for HIV infection. It's not your orientation, it's your copulation. In the matter of sexuality, HIV is not about whether you are gay or straight. HIV is about who you're sleeping with, who you're having sex with, and whether or not that sex is protected. Many believers don't know that. They just don't know. They are ignorant. Many believers don't know that the highest rate of HIV infections are among heterosexual black females under the age of 40. And speaking of age, many believers do not know the high percentage of geriatric infection. Folks living in senior citizen homes having unprotected sex. They just don't know. Many believers do not know. Speaking of homosexual and heterosexual, many believers do not know the difference between homosexuals and pedophiles. Many believers do not know how many incarcerated men, and I'm glad Michelle is coming from the release program, how many incarcerated men have sex with men in the joint, but do not see themselves or consider themselves to be homosexual. It's just something they do while they're in prison. And then those same men come out of prison, HIV positive, infected, and bring that infection home to their wives and or their girlfriends, with several states in this union forbidding mandatory testing for prisoners about to be released. Believers just don't know. They are ignorant. Many believers do not know that the names they use, the negative comments they make, and the prejudices they harbor hurt HIV positive infected people emotionally and psychologically more than any age-related physiological pain will ever hurt them. They just don't know. They are ignorant. And going back to the book and text that I used to introduce this keynote, many believers confuse biology with theology. Look at the text, John 9, verse 1. The man was born blind. That's biology. And these believers want to know who sinned to cause his blindness. That's theology. Did the man's parents sin there as Jesus before he was conceived? Is that what they said? As he was conceived? Is that what they said? Did they cuss when they came? Did they use God's name in vain? Oh, Lord! Did they say while he was in the womb or worship, and he said while he was still in the womb before he was born? That is a question based on theology, a flawed theology, I might add. A theology that conceives of a cruel God and not a caring God. But his condition has nothing to do with theology. Whether the theology is flawed or fabulous, his condition is a matter of biology. And that catapults us directly from John 9 in the 1st century to June 6 in the 21st century. Many believers are ignorant in our day, just like the ignorant believers in Jesus' day. In our time and in our text, we confuse biology with theology. HIV and AIDS is a condition that is a matter of biology, not theology. Your immune system has nothing physiologically or epidemiologically to do with your belief system. The question they raised with Jesus, however, is a theological question, and it comes from a place that's a very dangerous place. It's like the questions that we hear and that we ask about HIV/AIDS in 2014. Did they get it from drugs? That's bad. Did they get it from unprotected sex? That's bad. But she's married. He's married. Who played around outside the marriage? Who sinned? Did they get it through homosexual sex? That's bad. Did they get it from anal sex? Some say that's bad. Male, female, anal sex? Marital, anal sex? Or male having sex with males, anal sex? You can go from bad to worse. Who sinned? Did they get it from a blood transfusion at the hospital? Or in the ambulance taking them to the hospital after an accident? The needle hadn't been properly sterilized. That puts them in another place. That makes them good people. Above suspicion, above stigmatization, above cultural condemnation. We can sympathize with them. I call that showing selective sympathy. Ready to offer hypocritical help. We'll gladly offer assistance if you got it the right way. About the business of blaming folk instead of blessing folk. And the blame game among ignorant believers is a prelude to the shame game, where we stigmatize and discriminate. We shame folk. The arguments and discussions I've heard among ignorant believers over 30 years of HIV ministry remind me of the argument and the debate that's going on between saved folk at the bottom of the Mount of Transfiguration. You remember Jesus coming down the mountain from a high moment of holiness and walks into a hellish moment of churchness. Boy is in need of help. A boy has a physical condition, and the church is busy arguing over what's wrong with the boy and their opinion, how he came to be that way, and what they think is a solution to the boy's problem. Just like when AIDS in 2014, 30 years later, there's fussing among the saints instead of focusing on the sick. Ignorant believers are busy blaming folk instead of blessing folk. They're arguing instead of aiding. They're teaching doctrine instead of touching the downcast. They're still preaching at folk and not providing ministry for folk, providing housing, providing meds, providing care, providing counseling. That is what our HIV/AIDS ministry is trying to do faithfully based on Herman's words to me. No one should have to live like this. And no one should have to die like this. And Herman's words lead me to my other bookend of scripture, which is, in substance, my recommendation to you. I've given you my 30-year review or retrospection. Let me close with my brief recommendation or invitation. We started off with John 9, verse 1. Let me close you and leave with you 1 Corinthians 15:58. Again in the New Revised Standard Translation. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, knowing what obstacles we face in our fight against HIV/AIDS, in treatment and in finding a cure. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, knowing the way over which we have come in this struggle, and knowing the long march ahead of us as we renew our resolve and revive our determination. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, knowing that we wage this war on the personal level and the policy level. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, knowing that we do not walk alone or work alone, knowing that the Good Shepherd walks with us and works through us. Therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, keep on working, be steadfast. Keep on walking, be unmovable. Keep on doing what you do for God and for God's children. Always abounding, always exceeding in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord, your labor and your love are not in vain. Peace.